Donald Trump has apparently learned over the past couple of weeks that if your approval ratings are going down, one way to at least stabilize, if not inch back up, is to begin dropping bombs. I was worried that he would learn that lesson. It surprisingly took him about 3 months, but he seems to have learned it. But his numbers are still going down. And so we're gonna have a little discussion about what that might mean and how he might attempt to recover and what that would mean. First, we wanna bring up this chart. This is an aggregation of a lot of different approval rating polls. The black line is approval, which means that he's not doing too good there. But you see there that there was a gradual going down over the course of March, a jump up just a few days ago. Weird, I wonder where that came from. And then it starts going down again. And I believe that that barely includes post-Moab approval ratings. So we'll have to see what effect dropping the largest non-nuclear bomb that we have has on his approval ratings. But so at the same time that all this has been going on, especially because of Syria, it seems like some of his most high-profile white nationalist and right-wing supporters have started to question whether he's the man that they thought he was. I'm not gonna mention their names because I despise them and I don't wanna give them any press. But a lot of people have been hesitant, saying he didn't say anything about going into Syria. We thought he was gonna be a non-interventionist. And so I'm wondering, with that going on and him potentially booting Steve Bannon out of the White House, there's been some rumblings about that Jared Kushner is now the one with all the influence, and the nationalists in the White House are sort of losing ground. What does it mean if he has to make that about face? If his base leaves him and he can't count on those people who are so, MAGA, make America great again throughout the campaign, what do you think he might do other than just bombing across the Middle East? Like, how does he get those people back?
Does he get them back?
Does it matter that he's lost them? Like, what does it mean for the country either way?
I think it means, well, in a sort of political way, the midterms are probably the most serious thing that could change. For if you have a unhappy base that then goes to the polls and sends someone else to fix it or counter or something like that. I think that is a possible scenario.
Or simply stays home.
Yeah,
they could just stay home.
That's
give
true.
us Congress.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, he is supposed to follow through with jobs and good, high-paying, quality jobs.
Yeah.
And so far, that seems to be this other thing. And I think
separate from these other issues.
Yes, and there's healthcare, there's tax, reform, and then there's this international conflict that seems to be sucking us into more and more. But I just think that I think the further he gets away from strategies that improve the economy for people who voted, you'll see a disenfranchised base who will send Democrats or stay home.
Or stay
I love it because now they're in on the con, right? They know that they've been conned by this guy who pretty much made like a career out of conning people out of their hard-earned money, right? And so now all these Make America Great Again red hats, which are like the brown shirts of our day, they're like, oh, he's not gonna do all the horrible, horrible things he promised us, right? And I think they will stay home for the midterms. I hope they do. But the most interesting thing to me about this article, 9 ultra-nationalist Trump supporters who are rapidly losing patience with his presidency, is like the description of the Trump coalition, okay? It's establishment Republicans, former Tea Party insurgents, Wall Street players, and clash of civilization ethno-nationalists. This is awesome. This is like the perfect description of the Trump coalition, right? It's like team of rivals meets confederacy of dunces, right? It's like how many idiots can we get in a room to make bad decisions and see what happens? Let's make a reality TV show. Horrible president.
And these groups also despise each other. That they're being forced to work together, but none of them seem to like each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, so it looks like there's like sort of Reince Priebus. He's kind of going along with Bannon and Jared Kushner, but he has closer ties to establishment Republicans who have resisted him on a couple of issues so far since the inauguration. You have Steve Bannon, who looks like he's on the outs, but who knows? It could just be a sort of framing thing, make you think that he's no longer as influential as he was. And then you have Jared Kushner. I think that each of those three is unique in how it would screw us over if they had his ear. But one might be better than the others. I know a lot of people think that if Jared Kushner actually is the one that Trump is listening to, that's a good sign. I don't know, does that make you guys feel any better if it's not Steve Bannon, if Jared Kushner, the guy who's now in charge of reforming government, managing the peace process in the Middle East, He's dealing with China directly. He's 36 years old and he's in charge of basically every priority. He's going to be in charge of North Korea.
I mean, better than Trump.
Does that make you feel better?
I mean, it's better than Trump doing it, for the love of God. I mean, I would take like a monkey in a hat over like Donald Trump negotiating with China. You know what I mean? Like, I think it would be, so yeah, Jared Kushner, is he better than that? But I mean, the best thing about this article is that they're fighting with each other, right? They're just amplifying the discord, which means they're not going to be able to get anything accomplished. And hopefully they shove out that wing that's led under Bannon, because he's the most dangerous person in America and potentially the world right now. He is the guy that thinks we are in for a clash of civilizations, and that this moment is the moment where we have the fourth turning, which is some theory he believes in, right? Google it, all right? And it's gonna like end civilization, and there's this great 80-year cycle that's gonna be met. We have to get rid of that guy. He's rooting for world war, you know? And I think if it gets rid of Bannon, yeah, it's a good thing. But the basic fact for the Trump administration is they're fighting a two-front war now. They're fighting with the establishment, which they were fighting with already, and now their base of support is totally like fleeing them, right? For breaking all of their promises. And once you have a two-front war, you're in for some like deep trouble.
I mean, the question then is, if he's going to try to reel one back in, which one would be easiest? I mean, there's some bills he could sign that the establishment Republicans I think would be big fans of. I think that they're largely going to agree on tax reform. I know that everybody's saying it's going to be really difficult. I think there's some general principles that the Republicans have been working for a long time that he also supports. But I think the wild card in all this, like the dropping bombs in the Middle East and Syria and all that, that's one thing. But we still haven't seen what happens when there's a big terror attack inside of the US. And I think that how he responds to that and how he and perhaps Bannon try to use that could be horrifying. What legislation is passed in the wake of that, if you remember 9/11, big changes can happen in the wake of a big terror attack. I hope it doesn't happen obviously objectively, but also politically, that's a scary time, and he might be able to reel the far right back in by clamping down on civil rights and civil liberties then.
Our reporter Jordan Chatton broke the Donna Brazile story. He was right, she just apologized for it. Help us get more reporters like that. You're the one responsible for that. Thank you, and let's do more right now at tytnetwork.com/go.